I think I'm taking part in a world record because we have been sitting here and listening to around 31 speeches. That's quite impressive. All right, I have decided to talk about the art of working in a coalition government in which a party like ours, the Social Liberal Party, or Radikale Venstre, has excelled for many years. We are a small centrist party with 17 mandates out of 179 in total. And we are now in government. Governing with a combination of minority and majority coalition is a core part of Radikale Venstre DNA. Our party has over time played all possible roles in coalition structures, including leading the government, being part of a government, and acting as supporting party in parliament. It's a standing joke in Denmark that Radikale can't ever make up their minds about where they belong. And in essence, that is true, since we are a center party who is able to collaborate with both left and right, and we seek influence wherever we can get it on all the issues that matter to us. However, we have, and we do of course have, core values to which we stick, and we don't voluntarily budge on those issues. We abhor contract politics, of which the last decade of government in Denmark was dominated before we took office. The previous conservative coalition government was supported by a right-wing, immigrant-hostile party called Danish People's Party, or DF. As long as DF got more restrictive laws on immigration implemented as a bargain, they would happily vote for just about anything that the conservative government came up with. There was no need to negotiate their proposals with the opposition, that is to say us, or the left side of the parliament, as they had the majority with the Danish People's Party, and that's called contract politics. So the parties that formed the coalition government today, that is to say with us, were kept out of influence for almost 10 years. That was a terrible situation for our party and also for the Danish people. And worse, when we took office with the Social Democrats and the Socialists, our group of parliament members was young and inexperienced. We had been kept out of government for 10 years, and a generation change was inevitable. Therefore, now that we are in government, we are determined to make broad agreements on legislation to make the laws last longer than one period of government, that is to say 4 years in Denmark. That produces stability, and we think that coalition governments that work across the middle are more dynamic and help contain extreme legislation, as we saw during the conservative rule of the previous decade. The coalition that was built in 2011 between Social Democrats, the Radikale Venstre, and Socialist People's Party was built on a basic agreement which has resulted in numerous and much needed reforms on education, taxation, energy, climate, environment, infrastructure, retirement, and unemployment benefits. However, it also led to a lot of clashes where special party interests were at stake, and it resulted in internal commotion within all three parties. But that is business as usual in a coalition government in Denmark. Let me give you a few examples. Earmarked paid paternity leave has long been a core issue for us in the Radikale Venstre. When our present government was formed 3 years ago, during 2 weeks in a secret hotel room in Copenhagen, paternity leave was incorporated into the government foundation. Last year, however, the Social Democrats got cold feet, seeing the public opinion swaying towards the tendency of letting the families themselves decide how mother and father would share the parental leave. Which is to say that in 95% of the cases, the mother would take it all. Much to the regret of ordinary members in our party, the government decided to retract a proposal for an earmarked 3-month paid paternity leave. This decision triggered large controversy internally in our party, and at our annual Congress, we had heated discussions on the subject. Our party leader and Vice Prime Minister, Margrethe Vestager, who has now been appointed EU Commissioner, so she's left our party, was openly upset with the disobedient members who questioned the decision. However, the decision prevailed, and it still does. Our party leader refrained, that's what I think, from insisting on paternity leave because she didn't want to cause the leading party, that is to say the Social Democrats, to lose more voters. She did this as a compromise. For this year's Congress in our party, disgruntled members created a resolution that states that Radikale Venstre still work for the implementation of a paid, earmarked paternity leave. The resolution was adopted by a huge majority. It does not change the law, but it sends a clear message to the legislators of our party. We have had to swallow a few camels too, as we say in Danish, because working in a coalition government means that you master the art of compromise. It also means that you have to break plenty of promises that your party made during the election campaign. Because as soon as you start working across parties in a coalition government, it is impossible to honor all the promises that you made during the election to your voters. Thus, the path of coalition governments is usually littered with broken promises. The Social Democrats in our present government had to give up quite a few promises, as they didn't do as well in their elections as they had hoped for. However, Margrethe Vestager, our leader, still pointed to the Social Democrat leader, Helle Thorning, as our next prime minister, knowing very well that Radikale would get a lot of influence. And we did get a lot of influence. Some would say too much. As the Social Democrats are bleeding voters left and right, whereas Radikale has remained pretty stable all along. The last party in the coalition, the Socialist People's Party, SF we call them, was badly bruised by working in a coalition government. It was the first time in the party's history that it assumed governmental responsibility, and as it appears, the cooperation ended in a very noisy divorce. SF has now left the coalition and is trying to get back to its former self after agreeing on compromise after compromise with the coalition, where the SF voters basically didn't recognize their own party. And there is no doubt that this government, that is to say Radikale Venstre and the Social Democrats and the Socialist Party, have more often than ever been turning to the left, or to the right, sorry, and thus steering the coalition to the right on certain issues. The worst crisis erupted, and this was where the socialists finally had enough, when the Danish state-owned energy giant Dong wanted to sell off some of its shares to private investors. And the best offer came from American Goldman Sachs, who practices tax evasion on Cayman Island or other islands, I don't know, and was one of the big culprits to trigger the financial crisis back in 2008. Many Danes in general, and the Socialist Party in particular, were enraged when the Social Democratic Minister of Finance accepted the offer from Goldman Sachs. During a few dramatic days, the socialists, looking like they were split into particles, ended up voting to leave the government. So, and I'm stopping now, Radikale is now in coalition with Social Democrats all alone and far from having a majority. And we work from one bill to the next in acrobatic exercises to achieve majority with either the left or the right, without having to pay too high prices. Election is 1 year away, and the government is hoping to see the conducted politics create results that will convince the voters that we did the right thing. But right now, the Conservative wing is leading by a fairly large margin, and it will be a tough battle to bring the voters back. As you have now realized through my tale of failures and successes of a coalition government, it is really, really complicated and demanding to get the necessary things done and to keep everybody happy in such a government. But as I said earlier, it can be the path to a balanced rule where one party can prevent another party from going off the scale and introducing extreme laws. It is the art of compromise, dialogue, and the ability to think creatively. And believe me, you need to be creative. Thank you.